7 Days of Sunny June, Book 2 by Blue Bastard. Saturday a.m., the pebbles even arranged. Chapter 11. When Sunset descended the library stairs that morning, she found Twilight waiting for her at a table with a plate of spiced homemade pancakes sitting in the center. Swallowing, Sunset pulled out a chair and sat down across from the princess before filling the plate in front of her. Every sound seemed deafening in the silence between them. Once she had a suitable amount of syrup on her pancakes, Twilight opened her mouth to speak, but Sunset wanted to say her piece first. Listen, Twilight, I know I screwed up yesterday, and I want to make it right. She said, if it'll prevent me to leave Golden Oaks for a couple of hours, I'd like to set things right with Raspberry. Oh, okay, good. Twilight seemed unsure what to say. Sunset to do just that. That saves me time on the whole speech I prepared. Most of Sunset's amusement, Twilight tossed away what appeared to be a couple of cue cards. The rest of the breakfast passed in silence, with Sunset acutely aware of every sound. When they had both finished, Twilight waterlessly got up and moved to the front door. You ready? She asked, her tone indicating neither anger or joy. Yeah, let's go, answered Sunset, finding herself wanting a cup of coffee, but that would need to wait. As the pair of ponies silently made their way through Ponyville, going through its morning routine, Sunset could feel the cautious look from every single pony who now knew what she had done. It was not a good feeling, even though it was what Sunset had been expecting when she had first arrived. Not the first time she felt this way either. Those few weeks at Carolot High following her defeat had been no different. But at least in that scenario, she had the 5 girls that stood by her, even though she felt she didn't deserve their kindness. Those very girls were now waiting for her as ponies, watching her with guarded expressions. They stood along their path to her apparent destination, a rustic bread and breakfast with a hanging sign that helpfully identified it as the Traveler's Retreat. The glares for the 5 ponies poured into Sunset as the walked to the gallows. No matter how much Sunset reminded herself that the 5 ponies she walked past were not her friends, all she could see were the 5 human girls standing at the very ends of a crater in homecoming dresses. When Twilight and Sunset got to the front door, they found a very displeased-looking elderly mayor waiting. Are you Sunset Shimmer? The mayor asked, eyeing the unicorn carefully. Yes, replied Sunset. She immediately felt a sharp pain on her face as she reeled from a vicious slap. That's for hurting my daughter! Mrs. Cashmere, I know you're upset, said Twilight, but the idea about all of this is to resolve the problem without violence. No, I deserve that, Karen Sunset, along with a swift kick in the rear, too. That could be arranged, stated Cashmere with slightly exhaled enthusiasm. Mom, not outside, came a fourth voice just beyond the door. Guess won't like it if you're randomly beating up ponies in the view of the street. Soon enough, Raspberry Barrel appeared next to her mother figure in the doorway. It also looks bad for me, since a princess of any sort shouldn't need to rely on her elderly mother to handle a small dispute. You have a good point, dear, Casimir actually asked reluctantly. Though before she fully retreated, the older man replied to Raz's ear, but kick her in the rear with your good leg anyway. Just for the principle, it doesn't matter. My left leg is fine, thank you, loudly gestured Raz in return. Knowing Casimir hadn't meant to comment seriously, not much anyway. She still shook her head all the same. Parents, she muttered, before turning her away and attention to the ponies at the door. Well, Shimmer, shall we get this over with? On one condition. Got any coffee? Sunset couldn't understand why Twilight decided to react by rolling her eyes in disbelief. What? And you never made it through a day without a Starbucks 50 double mocha? Both Dark Mage Unicorn and Alcorn Princess looked at Sunset with confusion. What's that? Twilight finally asked. It was all Sunset could do before to face something. Note to self, must find a way to tease about Twilight about this later. She intensely muttered semi-audibly. Alright, the cup is hot, mind you, warned Raz, lifting 2 cups of coffee as she entered her bedroom. The bubbling mass of darkness coming from her horn still made Sunset nervous, and she shifted uncomfortably as she took the offending counter in her magic. Nero sat down next to Raspberry. Thanks, said Sunset, taking a sip. The hot, cavity goodness of a fresh brew was just what she needed. Now that is a good cup of coffee. All things considered, the talk was off to a good enough start. Sure, Raspberry's pet Phoenix had outright assaulted Sunset when he first entered, but a stern scolding from his master quickly cowed him. It's what keeps our guests coming back, joked Raspberry, making an odd light smile as she took a sip from her own cup. That should tell you something right there. That the ponies are willing to deal with the incomparable self just for some of Mom's homebrewed coffee. Sunset gave her a perplexed look. Oh, and this is your home? I thought all princesses needed to live in a giant castle or something. Heck no. Twilight still lives at the public library. It's not like some power above Celestial will come in and decide she needs to have a gaudy as hell replacement and have Golden Oaks leveled into splinters to force such a thing, right? No, Sunset started to fade a comfortable smile. Well, at least Sunset Twilight's current home suits her. She is a gigantic nerd after all. The breath came from Raspberry's nose could have been a laugh. Sunset took a long sip of her coffee so she wouldn't have to talk. But the action only delayed the inevitable. She knew she couldn't procrastinate forever. The smile and nod. Look, Raspberry, I owe you an apology for attacking you yesterday and for treating you like a criminal all week. Sunset said, it was wrong of me to assume the worst about you right off the bat. That's pretty much what people do to me. I should have known better. Raspberry sat there staring at Sunset as she measured her words. Behind her, the green phoenix appeared to be doing the same, just glaring at her. I appreciate your sincerity, Sunset. Apology accepted. Raspberry glanced down at what Sunset realized was her injured leg. Well, I don't appreciate the way you cost me my leg all over again. I don't hold anything else you did against you. Let's just say I'm used to being treated like a criminal. Also, Raspberry glanced away. I know all of what's about happening to your sister. Then you know why I've been so suspicious of you. Twilight's being attacked with dark magic. When she told me about her attacker, she described you. Even you had to admit there's something strange about that. Raspberry leaned over the table, looked down at her cup. I don't know what else to tell you, Sunset. That kind of magic's beyond my ability. If it wasn't, I would never use it to hurt any pony, let alone a complete stranger in another world. Raspberry leaned back in her chair, eyes on the ceiling as he thought. Maybe you told me a little bit more about your sister's condition. Does she have any of your symptoms? Aside from insomnia, no. The only thing he's done is try to... Sunset's eyes widened as he remembered another detail about Twilight's condition. Once he forgotten about it simply because it was too horrified to remember. I found her in the bathroom one night, completely naked with the whole room covered in her blood. She was scratching symbols into the walls. What kind of symbols? Raspberry was leaning closer now. Sunset looked around. Do you have a pen and paper I could use? Sunset remembered the symbols themselves as well. Twilight's exorcist-esque scrawlings wasn't the first time she'd seen them. Soon enough, Raspberry returned with a quill, an inkpot, and a notepad. Sunset hastily took the quill in her magic and dipped it in ink. Wow, haven't written with one of these in a while. She then proceeded to write out 6 symbols. When she was finished, Raspberry turned the notepad to study it. Do you know what it means? Sunset asked. Not really. Sunset sighed. No easy realized what she was brought out next. Raspberry, Celestia told me it's possible you could be doing this unintentionally. Raspberry closed her eyes. Look. The thing you need to understand about me is I don't always have full control of my powers. Sometimes if I'm under a lot of stress, my magic kind of takes control of me. Like it did when I hit your leg? Yes, and that's exactly the thing. That was just the first incident I've had in... Raspberry trailed off. Her eyes widened. A few months. Was this exactly when Twilight started having her nightmares? Sunset said, leaning closer. I think it's time you told me exactly what happened in Lonesome Dove. Raspberry worried at her lower lip before giving a relenting sigh. I suppose you're right. You better get comfortable, though. There's a lot I'm going to need to explain for it to all make sense. Sunset sits in her seat. She heard a sound like a faint crackle on radio. Then she heard a very faint voice. Look, I already said I checked the batteries. Wait, you hear that? Raspberry froze. Her ears sewing on tense as she listened. Why are you listening to Raz at Sunset again? The tiny voice sounded vaguely familiar. It came from somewhere inside the room. All of a sudden, Sunset had a sneaking suspicion about what or who she was. You're this thing, Ciara? Asked Lou. 5 members of the CMC were gathering in the treehouse headquarters. Though, unlike most Saturday mornings, they weren't searching for the cutie marks. Said they had a different interest they were trying to explore. Look, I already said I checked the batteries, and that this thing is fresh off of Dad's store cells, and he makes sure all the stuff works. He takes his satisfaction guaranteed promise literally. So why are we to Raz and Sunset again? We're not going to learn anything about Raz we don't already know. Because it's Sunset Zero who we're interested in. Exclaimed Apple Bloom. So he's the one from another world. Ain't you curious about what she's been living like over there? I guess. Shh. Husked Diamond. I think I'm getting something. She filled with a dial until a bit of static could be heard. These are so hard to tune. Nose and Apple Bloom noticed one detail they overlooked. Tiara? Last volume knob? Yes, so? Are you saying the train's been volume knob? We're not getting any. That's what we're doing. The receiver thing you put outside Raspberry's window. It's playing everything we're saying. We're the ones transmitting. We're the ones transmitting. Came the radio quality mirror of Apple Bloom's voice. As the 5 Crusaders all turned to the window, Heliodor slipped in, placed the receiver in his talons, easily on the table. Gave him a serious wink and was gone. Well, at least we know how it works, right? Sunset sat in perfect silence as Raspberry recounted the trials of her life. The more Sunset learned about her reflection, the more guilt she felt over her actions and thoughts the past week. Raspberry told her about her troubled life growing up in the small backwater town called Lonesome Dove. She spoke of how the entire town loathed and feared her because of her dark magic. She told Sunset about how her father viciously abused her, mostly viciously. Raspberry talked about how nearly a decade ago, she lost control of her dark powers and killed the brute in self-defense, forcing herself to flee the only home she ever knew. All the while, Sunset slumped lower and lower in her seat. All this time I've been telling everybody I had changed. I'm exactly the same as before. I just have different reasons for abusing people now. Instead, her gaze fell on the brace on Raspberry's hind leg. Once he deliberately stuck during their bow. Sunset was able to keep herself from wincing as he sucked the air through her teeth. The accent wasn't lost on Raspberry. Oh, don't worry. This actually happened relatively recently. It's not my father's work, she explained, lightly patting her brace. Sunset let out a breath and straightened up in her chair, relieved not to reopen any old wounds, literally or figuratively. Look, I'm sorry all that happened to you, but I don't see what this has to do with Twilight's nightmares. Because a couple of months ago, Twilight and I went back, Raspberry said, taking a calming breath. She thought it would be good for me to get some closure. Turns out she was right, though not in a way either of us expected. It gave her an inquisitive health tilt. Raspberry just sighed. Look, you and I don't fully understand everything that happened over those couple of days. All you need to know is things got weird. Let's just say I had some very literal past demons I had to deal with. Unfortunately, well, you already know how well I handle stress. Sunset nodded. So am I to assume you went all feral darkness monster then? That's one way of putting it, but yeah. It was pretty much up to Princess Twilight to keep me from destroying the whole town. Unfortunately, the feral darkness monster interpreted her actions as threatening and responded accordingly. I ended up using a dark spell to attack her mind. Whoa. Slow down, Speed Racer. Since exclaimed, we hopped around. Why do you know what's basically a mind read spell? I thought you said you didn't know how to do that. I said I didn't know how to use nightmare magic. However, I've been recently called to the Crystal Empire to help deal with the effects of Sombra's dark magic. You see, the Mad King liked to torture his subjects with nightmarish visions, designed to break their minds and bend them to his will. Sally was able to wipe most of their memories when the Empire returned not long ago. Anyway, there were still lingering effects of Sombra's spell on the minds of the Crystal Ponies, and I was called in to help fix it. Fight fire with fire, you know. Let's just say I learned way more about mind magic than I ever wanted to coming up with a counterspell. Right, so when you went crazy in Lonesome Dove, you recalled what you learned about Sombra's mind magic and used it on Twilight. Sunset said, thinking she knew where this was going. Yes. Twilight managed to reflect it and simply disappeared. We didn't think anything of it at the time. I designed it only to target her, after all. Raspberry rubbed her chin. But now it seems entirely possible the spell managed to cross dimensions. If you couldn't get Twilight, it went for the next best thing. Sunset's ears perked up and a hopeful smile appeared on her face. But if you came up with a counterspell to cure the Crystal Ponies, you could use the same spell to cure Twilight. That's the idea, Raspberry said. Sunset grinned and sprang to her face. It would be a simple matter of firing a counterspell through one of the mirrors. Leaning back in her chair, Sunset took what felt like the easiest breath she had in days. Part of her didn't quite believe it could be that simple. But deep down, she knew this was it. It was finally over. Over worrying, over crippling terror she would lose Twilight forever, finally beginning to wash out of her. Replaced by the hope that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. Ras, thank you for being understanding, Sunset said. You have no idea how much Twilight and the others mean to me. She's your family. Of course she does. Yeah, but she's so much more than that. Sunset said, glancing out the window on the bright, sunny day outside. You see, when Twilight Prince finally defeated me in the fall formal, she could have easily just turned her back on me. Hell, it would have been her right to do so. But instead, she gave me another chance at friendship. Then when Twilight came around, she gave me another chance at family. Sunset gave a single laugh. Funny. I owe everything I have to the Twilights of both worlds. To the very person I hated the most. Makes you think, doesn't it? Believe it or not, I know exactly what you mean. Raspberry said with a sympathetic smile. After I first killed my father and ran away from Lonesome Dove, I was consumed by guilt and despair, which could quite literally come back to haunt me later. Felt like the whole world was against me. Truth it was, at least before I met him. Raspberry jerked her head to the side of her room. Sunset looked at a crystalline bird stand with a green avian on top of it. Heliodor baked to his wing. Sunset could see his chest rising and falling as he snoozed. Healy was the first real friend I ever had. Raspberry continued. No, he's more than that. He's family. What's more, he gave my life meaning. Just like Twilight gave you yours. Sunset stopped, and then something occurred to you. Was that why you stopped? It took Raspberry a few seconds to guess what Sunset meant, but it clicked and her brow rose. You mean stopped myself appealing you through the heart yesterday? Yeah. You said your sister's name. Somehow I knew that you were just like me. Sunset smiled. I guess we really are reflections of each other after all. You know, it just occurred to me. This did the whole Mothra thing way better than Superman v Batman. The pair sat in companionable silence since. Their coffee long gone cold. Neither cared. The feeling of absolution they each felt was better than any caffeine. On the note of reflections, Raspberry fancily said, getting up and moving her desk to gather some papers. I was wondering if you could help me with Sombra's mirror. It'll be up to code, so to speak. If we're going to send that counterspell through, I could use your insight. That's the best idea Sunset heard all week. This was such a bad idea, thought Sunset as she swallowed with an audible gulp, trying to make herself as small as possible. The afternoon started out well enough. After a quick lunch with Raspberry and Twilight, Sunset accompanied a pair of princesses to Raspberry's hideout in the Everfree ruins, where she would be keeping Sombra's mirror. It was then they went about repairing the myriad spells and enchantments held within the looking glass. Sunset's knowledge of the mirror's appearance on the other side turned out to be instrumental in their work. The First sign that something was amiss was when a dome of pure darkness enveloped the mirror. It expanded like a black hole to envelop the three ponies along the rest of the structure. Despite the fact that they were now alone with the mirror inside the dark void, Raspberry had assured Sunset that what happened was perfectly normal. They were in no danger. She wanted to explain she had just completed the repairs on one of the mirror's secondary functions, which then reacted to Sunset's presence. She was, after all, the last pony to use the mirror to travel between worlds. Sometime after that, when the validity of Raspberry's claim of safety was proven, Pinkie Pie, Applejack, Fluttershy, Rarity, Rainbow Dash all entered the void as easily stepping through the door. Twilight explained their presence by saying they needed to see what was about to be shown. Then Sunset saw Raspberry's notes. More specifically, she saw a sketch depicting a familiar scene of an older teenager confronting a younger one. "What the fuck is this?" Sunset yelled at Raspberry. "Where the fuck did you see this?" "Sunset, if you calm down, I can explain," Raspberry started. "Have you been reading my mind, Warlock?" "It's a function of Sombra's mirror," Twilight explained, effectively cutting off the tension. "One we just now fully repaired." Raspberry went on to explain what function Twilight was talking about. The more Sunset understood, the more unbridled terror welled up in her. "I'm sorry, I should have been more clear about what exactly we were doing here," Raspberry said apologetically. "As far as I know, the mirror should still be capable of sending you home, but she wanted me to repair this particular function." "What do you mean? Who?" That was when the great white alicorn entered the void, her ethereal mane almost lying to nothingness around her. Celestia strode towards the ponies gathered around the mirror silently, her face an unreadable mask. It made all the sense of Sunset now. Why he repaired this particular function of the mirror. Why Sunset had really been brought here. It was around the time Celestia's gaze found her. Sunset gulped and struck to the ground. "Sunset." At the sound of her mentor silently calling her name, Sunset opened her eyes and looked up. Celestia was still looking down at her. There was something in her expression that hadn't been there before. Sunset had noticed it when they had dined at the start of the week, and it was a testament to their long relationship with the fine princess he noticed it all. Celestia's face took on a more comforting appearance. All of a sudden, Sunset wasn't so afraid. Carefully, she stood to her full height and looked at Raspberry. "Sunset, we don't have to do this if you really don't want to," Raspberry said. "No, it's okay," Sunset replied. "It's probably for the best." "Show them." Went on, Raspberry lit up her horn, tendrils emerging that made a beeline for the 5 engraved points on the mirror. The 5 points on the mirror's frame soon began to glow as if a light was turned on behind them. It was a sickly glow at first, but the intensity grew brighter until suddenly the mirror itself stopped being a reflective surface as light radiated from it. Then a loud poof, as if the noise were being a cloud burst by Pegasus kicking it. Normal light shot out of the mirror and smashed itself against the black atmosphere. More orbs soon followed, until eventually, all the black around the ponies was replaced with bright images. There were creatures moving in a world that looked very different from Equestria. Those creatures, in that world, were all too familiar to Sunset Shimmer. "What tarnation?" exclaimed Applejack. Whatever Applejack was going to say next was lost in collective gas as the mirror itself began to project an image. This one commanded the attention of the group, as was a very different image than the ones playing around their heads. Dark night, pits of what appeared to be a frigid blizzard, the statue of some kind of equine, but not a pony in the forefront. Behind it was a building of some sort, snow piling in, but there appeared to be remains of a solo path from the entrance. Suddenly, the snow on one side of the statue melted, neatly revealing a polished marble surface, so shiny it was like a mirror. And through that surface tumbled a figure that sort of resembled a hairless monkey. Only the tuft on its hair was like a beacon in the snow, with red and yellow stripes. "Sunset, it's that to you?" Her attention moving from the figure to a pony now standing next to Celestia. He got a small nod of acknowledgement, as he was too scared what was coming next. Indeed, the mirror suddenly flashed, showing a much different scene. The Sunset in the mirror, now wearing clothes and inside what looked like a school, was just one of the many similar creatures of both sexes Their bodies, various shapes of brown, with the only color variation in their hair and eyes. Only Sunset and Mira appeared to be picking on, much to every opponent's shock, another creature that looked a lot like Fluttershy. Mira had flashed through several sequences, where it was a similar scene, only the individual being picked on was different. Applejack, Rarity, Rainbow Dash, Piggy Pie. The mirror didn't stop. He kept iterating past the familiar faces, and a very vivid picture of what Sunset had been up to in the mirror human world was painted. The rest of Twilight's friends all looked at Sunset in disbelief, finally starting to understand what they were seeing. Sunset, are these your memories? Rarity asked, her voice barely above a whisper. From the human world, yeah, Sunset replied, as all of her sins were laid bare. Her heart racing, her body shaking, Sunset looked up to study the face of her old mentor. Celestia studied every inch of what appeared to be under careful scrutiny. When she first returned to Equestria, Sunset had promised to submit herself to Celestia's judgment once Twilight was saved. With the deed done, it was clear that the princess now had sense of simmer to her vow.